Good morning, members. This is the Establishment Subcommittee. We have a quorum. I call this meeting to order. We have 4 papers for discussion on the agenda. The government submitted EC 2014-15 number 4 to members in relation to the change in the directorate posts approved in the past years, and I remind members that if there are direct or indirect pecuniary interests in relation to the agenda items today, please, in accordance with Rules of Procedure, Rule 83A, disclose the nature of the interest before you speak. And I would like to remind members the relevant requirements in Rule 84, Rules of Procedure, where direct pecuniary interests are involved. And we will start with EC bracket 2014-15-21 in relation to the retention of a supernumerary post of a chief engineer in the Highways Department from the 7th of July 2015 with immediate effect upon approval of the FC, whichever is later, to the 31st of December 2019 for a maximum period of 4 years and 6 months to provide dedicated support to and to monitor the completion of the Hong Kong section of the XRL project by MTR. And I already briefed members on the government officials attending this meeting. I won't repeat them. Would any members like to ask questions? 5 minutes, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. It is very important that the person taking up this post should have experience. I earlier asked about information on the experience of the colleagues responsible for monitoring the XRL project. And I'd like to know, in relation to the Railway Development Office, let's say Mr. Yang Kwang-sang is the chief engineer and he has 14 years of experience, who is the most experienced among his colleagues, and I'd like to know when he will retire. There could be a succession problem when experienced colleagues retire, such that the next generation chief engineers will have only little experience, to the extent that when the new chief engineer to assume the post has little or no experience at all in monitoring the project, then objectively speaking, there will be an impact on the monitoring work of the government on the XRL project. So in relation to the rank of chief engineer in the Railway Development Office, I'd like to know when these chief engineers will retire, and whether there will be an experience or succession gap in the 4 years' time. Yes, we'll take the question, Deputy Director. First of all, I need to correct a piece of information. Well, in fact, before I assumed office, it's not the case that I did not have experience. When I was a trainee engineer, I had this experience at the railway office, and I was responsible for the KCRC project to modernize and the KCRC, and I think the most important experience is about taking on mega infrastructure projects. So on railway projects, colleagues with less experience would be disadvantaged. So we need to ensure that as far as the office is concerned, we need to have engineers who are experienced. At the same time, we also hire M&V consultant. And one of the criteria for the consultant is that it should have experience in undertaking mega railway projects overseas. And for this consultant, the consultant does have experience in UK and in Taiwan. So for the team as a whole, we do have experience. As for this new colleague, he's not Mr. Yang, but Mr. Chen. And judging from his age, succession is not the problem. However, where more experience is required, the government will make necessary arrangements. For example, succession arrangements could be made so that younger colleagues could get hands-on experience sooner. And in event of emergency, we can also lengthen the service period of certain colleagues so that the team as a whole will have experience in monitoring the railway project. Perhaps I can ask the Director of Highways to give us more information. We're talking about 4.5 years. And from the information I have, I understand that experienced colleagues will be retiring in the Railway Development Office, and I'd like to know the years of experience your colleagues have and the basic information such as when they will retire. Director, please give us this information as soon as possible. Next, Mr. Leung Kwok-hong. Chairman, I think the government has gone crazy. Don't bite off more than you can chew. 9 mega infrastructural projects. Have you trained your staff? No. C.Y. Leung or Donald Tsang just took on the projects because the mainland authorities said so. And you're asking us for more funding. This post will be for 4.5 years, so it will last till 2020. All along, I'm against spending so much money on the XRL project, and now there is cost overrun. So my question is this: how can you convince the subcommittee that this person will be up for the job? Well, there will be a delay of several years. What candidate do you have in mind? One option is to allow the existing chief engineer to work for another 4.5 years, or to find his apprentice to work to take up the post. You should explain that. How would you avoid making the same mistake? If you say that this is not relevant to the XRL project, then what's the point of creating the post? It's pointless. So my question is this: why is it 4.5 years instead of 2 years? Can we just, try him out first? Well, why don't the Secretary answer the question? Why don't you answer the question? Why should the post last for 4.5 years? Do you have a candidate in mind? Or is it that you have no alternative but to extend the post for 4.5 years? Under Secretary. Regarding Mr. Leung's question, I think the answer is set out in the paper. I want to emphasize that this application is about retaining the post to the 31st of December 2019, not in relation to extension of service of a particular staff. Of course, the MTRCL will need to conduct a final assessment.
The project will be wrapped up by the end of 2017. But within this project, we still have a lot of problems to solve. For instance, at the beginning phase of operation, a lot of monitoring must be done. A lot of contracts would still be outstanding, and they would have to deal with claims. And at the same time, the government has the right to seek claims from MTRCL. So these are some of the work we have to do even after decommissioning. After the end of 2017, we feel the need to have dedicated staff to deal with the remaining work up until 2019. So that's why we need this post. And with regards to the candidates, I'm confident that the Director of Highways can use his best judgment. Leung Kwok-hung. Chairman, in paragraph 6, you mentioned 5 recommendations raised by the consultant, including improving institutional arrangements for concession agreements. Let me read it out because not everyone might have read this part. To adopt internationally recognized best practices for complex projects. You only have 35 seconds left. For these 5 recommendations, you said you are going to hire 2 or 3 engineers. So which of them will take up which? Can you let him answer your question, please? I'll be very brief, Chairman. These recommendations were put forward by the independent expert panel to the government. So these are work the entire government team has to do. It's not the work of specific engineers. Mr. Gary Fan. Right now, the government wishes to retain the post of chief engineer under the Railway Development Office, and his job or her job is to monitor the XRL project and provide dedicated support. And the cost overrun of the XRL project is a joke, and the Undersecretary and Secretary should be held responsible, and the Legislative Council has the duty to monitor the XRL project right till the end. That's our responsibility. One of the reasons for the cost overrun is the site investigation work in the West Kowloon terminal, and there wasn't enough time to carry out a comprehensive site investigation, and only after 4 or 5 years the MTRCL found out the problem. And for the golf course, no site investigation was done whatsoever. So before these 2 chief engineer posts were in place as early as 2008. So at that time, how did the engineers monitor the project and provide the relevant support? Did they find out that the MTRCL had inadequacies in terms of its site investigation work? And if so, why was the MTRCL allowed to commence its work, which led to the eventual cost overrun for XRL? Undersecretary, Director. Thank you very much for the question. First of all, I'd like to say that the delay of the XRL projects might not have a direct correlation with the site investigation work. Back then, the MTRCL performed extensive drilling, and at that time, to the north of the West Kowloon terminal, it had ample understanding of the soil conditions underground, and the contractors were informed of the situation, and they were aware that there are a lot of stones underground or rocks. when we monitored the MTRCL's work at that time, we hired a monitoring and verification consultant to help monitor MTRCL's work, especially on the site investigation and soil investigation. So we were aware that the MTRCL did extensive work on soil investigation, and with the information obtained, they designed the foundation of the structure. So our staff were involved throughout the process in terms of monitoring the consultant and monitoring MTRCL. Thank you, Chairman. I think what Mr. Lau did was dodging the question. He merely said so investigation was done. My question was, why did the chief engineers allow the project to commence without any site investigation work? He only told us about the consultant and MTRCL. You did not explain why the chief engineer fulfilled his duty of monitoring the project and providing dedicated support. My point was that the chief engineer did not conduct his responsibility properly of monitoring, and why did you allow the project to commence without site investigation? It's a joke. And Chairman, site investigation work at the golf course started before the contract began. So in my opinion, the chief engineer did what he could at that time. Any other questions for the first round? Please press the bell. Please press the button. Mr. Adlin Leung, first round, please. Chairman, according to the government paper, in these 4.5 years, this supernumerary post, together with the department costs, the costs will reach more than $12 million. And it's not apparent why the total costs would run to $110 million. Can you give us a breakdown of salary, departmental costs, and so on? Director. Thank you very much for the question. For the $112 million, these consist of various salary costs. It appears to be a big sum, but we are talking about a period of 4 years and 6 months, including it consists of a team of staff, including the chief engineer and 13 or 14 other staff. That's the total cost over 6.5 years. Why is it 6.5 years? Oh, excuse me, I meant 4.5 years. When I look at the establishment table, I'd like to know how much or how many staff is covered under the 112 million. When you look at enclosure 4, we should look at enclosure 4, right? Page 2 of enclosure 4. The existing organization chart of Hong Kong Joy Macau Bridge Hong Kong Project Management Office, and the Railway Development Office is on the right side of the organization chart. So you mentioned there would be 13 or 14 staff. Where is it located on this chart? This chart doesn't actually show the number of staff, but according to this page, You can see the Railway Development Office on the right side. This organization chart shows the hierarchy of the Highways Department other than the Railway Development Office. And there are no branches under the Railway Development Office. If you want to know the structure of the Railway Development Office, you should look at Enclosure 1 instead. Under the Railway Development Office, you see two branches, Group 1 and Group 2. And these two new posts are under Railway Development Group 2. And under Group 2, you can see 4 further branches, including Division 2-1, 2-2, and 2-3. And the new post is under Division 2-3, but the number of staff is not shown on this chart. Right now, the Director of Highways said that there would be 13 to 14 engineering staff including the Division 2-3 staff, and the total number of staff would be 13 or 14. The number of staff is not depicted on this chart, but what kind of positions would they be in? The paper does not include such breakdown. But in response to questions from legislators, we did mention that there would be 5 senior engineers and 8 engineers, so there would be a total of 13. Any other questions for the first round? Mr. Albert Chan, 5 minutes, please. I've been following this project for a number of years. And for other infrastructure projects, I've not seen as many mistakes, delays, and cost overruns. There have been a lot of problems under this project. In the 1990s, when the government decided to commence the 10 infrastructure works, it decided to hire overseas experts to establish a monitoring mechanism. And the idea at that time was to transfer the experience and knowledge of the overseas experts to the local staff. And at that time, a lot of senior government officials were involved in these 10 infrastructure projects. As time changes, I'm not sure whether they've forgotten about their experience, and without the overseas experts, we have begun to see a lot of problems. I'm not sure whether it's because these people must be monitored. You have not really understood the extent of the issues. You often put blame on the private market, but the market, but the government is a major market player. You should not jeopardize your own work. And in order to solve coordination problems, dedicated teams were set up, but now you don't have any dedicated teams. I hope the FSAB would look at the issue.
Tell the Development Bureau and the Transport and Housing Bureau, but none of the bureaus would take up this responsibility. So I think obviously there is a problem with the system. It allows individual bureaus to make mistakes, and then we can do nothing but to rectify the problem by pumping more money in to create more posts. We are neglecting the systemic problems. I have been following infrastructural projects for more than 2 decades. I'd like to see if there is a brief reply to my question. I think we should set up a review mechanism as soon as possible, because these problems are systemic problems, and they will just continue because we have more infrastructural projects coming on. We have reclamation projects, and if you don't change the system, there will continue to be problem with staffing and making claims. Thank you, Mr. Chan, for your question. And in fact, Mr. Chan raised the same question at the FC, and the FSTB will exercise financial control over these financial projects to ensure that there is a cap on additional funding. But of course, for the infrastructure projects approved, we hope that the funding applications would be approved at the FC at the appropriate time. Yes, but I'm talking about the monitoring work over the 10 core infrastructure projects in the 1990s. Now, in terms of the system, in terms of staffing, there are huge differences. Before that, we did not have mega infrastructure projects. Now, and then we started 10 infrastructure projects at the same time. So we need to refer to the practice then and compare with what is happening now. Why is it that the projects are coordinated by experienced government officials, and yet there are so many problems? You need to review and find out the differences between the two systems and between now and then, because you have been doing the same for 20 or 30 years. Yes. Thank you. We will closely monitor the expenditure and the use of funds for each and every infrastructural projects, and we will also follow up on your view with the relevant bureaus. CSB, anything to add? No? No more questions, right? I want to add this. I'm not witch hunting. Mr. Aberchan, please wait for your next round. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, second round, 4 minutes. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. Now, about the project team overseeing the XRL project, in the expert report, or the IEP report, there are 2 major points. MTR had not been required to provide project updates and latest projection on the progress of projects to ensure that the MTRCL's undertakings are credible. Secondly, in April 2014, before the Highways Department conducted the review, there was no evidence to show that in relation to the MTRCL's project and projection, the Highways Department had exercised any independent assessment. This is the observation of the independent expert panel. So on the 2 observations, for the staff responsible for the project in the Railway Development Office, what have they done in relation to information provided for determining the cost for all cost overrun or delay? It's been more than a year since April 2014, and the MTRCL is saying that works won't be completed until 2017. And what have the engineers in the Railway Development Office provided by way of a report or information to ensure that works will be completed by the end of 2017? Or have they assessed in relation to the project costs? Under Secretary, have you done so? Under Secretary, well, I'll take the question first and I'll defer to the Director. In the middle of last year, when the MTRCL suggested that they could not complete the project in time and that they would not complete the project until 2017, and then they also proposed an increase in the project, pointed out an increase in project cost to $71.2 billion. We did not just take in the information as they suggested. The colleague taking up this post actually played a very important role. He checked the information provided by the MTRCL to see if it was justified, and as we explained in the subcommittee on the matters relating to railway projects, he had to assess whether the projects could indeed be completed within schedule. And we also noted that there are additional works not included in their plan. And in fact, these have been pointed out by the colleagues in charge. And we did put forward a number of questions for MTRCL to give us full answers. So for the past 14 months or so, our colleagues have been focusing their effort in this regard. 14 months, and yet we still don't get an update on the project costs and completion date. Allow Director to answer your question first, please. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wu, for your question. Mr. Wu asked 2 questions, and we already responded to these questions at the subcommittee. In short, on measures to expedite work process, there is a mechanism, and all works have to be approved in advance by the panel before the works can be incorporated in the project. Now, on independent assessment, the Highways Department has been practicing independent assessment. And for example, when there was a delay in the tunneling works, the Highways Department did ask the MTRCL to provide a report to see how works we could catch up with the schedule. And for the past 14 months, together with the M&V team, we have been closely monitoring the MTRCL on the latest work schedule and the project costs, and we have also urged MTRCL to clearly to review once again the project cost and the schedule. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong. Well, Mr. Albert Chan is just being silly. We need hardware as well as software. Well, back then, the Communist Party was exercising strict control over the use of funding. They were concerned that the British colonial government might be spending all our money on infrastructural projects. So as long as checks and balances, it would do. In such a confidential, highly confidential meeting as the Executive Council meeting, there are checks and balances, but now things are different. It has to do with software. Hardware is meaningless. After Mr. James Tan criticized C.Y. Leung, he was his title of being an NPC deputy was taken away. All these are political projects. Mr. Lau, Director, Can you not give those answers? At the time when the cost overruns of SRL was first exposed, it would have been great if you had given these answers. But now it's been some time. Could you say that you had read through everything? Now the engineer. Now, in relation to this chief engineer, he will be responsible for any negotiation on cost overruns. What are you talking about? The more you say, the more I decide not to approve funding. No site investigation for the whole of the golf course, and the project just went ahead. It's ridiculous. You government officials often go there. Is it because it's frequented by the senior government that no site investigation has been conducted? And who should be responsible? I'm asking you. Clarify the fact, please. Mr. Leung Kok-hong, please allow Director to answer your question. Director, please. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Leung, for your question. Well, for what I said just now, I said the same at the Select Committee in the Legislative Council. I also supplied supplementary information. Now, about the golf course, as I mentioned just now, site investigation was conducted in the golf course according to the contract. Before approving the West Kowloon State Terminus contract, site investigation had been conducted. But was the information correct? I don't know what you're talking about. You say that site investigation was conducted before the West Kowloon Terminus contract commenced. But was it done correctly? And who should be responsible if it wasn't done correctly? Should you step down or what? Mr. Leung Kok-hong, please allow Director to answer. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Leung, for your question. Well, let me take this opportunity to clarify some facts. Site investigation seeks to check ground conditions. However, as pointed out in the MTRCL's report, distribution of isolated rocks could not be identified in the site investigation process. And isolated rocks would affect the progress of tunnel or wall construction. Who else would like to speak for the first round? Please press the button. Don't raise your hand. I tried, but I can't press the button. I've pressed the button for 10 times already. I've pressed 10 times already. All right, yes, it's shown. Mr. Lee Chok-yan, first round, 5 minutes. Mr. Lee Chok-yan. Chairman, this is about retaining this post for overseeing the XRL project. But we understand that the government will be saying that the project has commenced. Despite cost overruns, it should go on. And we don't know by how much it's going beyond the budget. And they say that they will be telling us after doing calculations how much it would go beyond the budget. I don't think Undersecretary will tell us who, in the end, is going to foot the bill. He won't be telling us this today. So my first question would be on cost overrun, by how much, and also who is going to foot the bill. Now, about the post, I understand that the post was created in 2008, and this is about retaining the post. And we understand that there is a investigation committee on the Guangzhou-Shenzhen XRL project. And I recall a famous quote from the director, and that is, lagging behind. It's not the same as delay. And they often say that they will catch up with the schedule. And then when MTRCL said that they couldn't catch up with the schedule, they then changed their version and said the same. And as reported in newspapers, I mean, at that time it was said that the XRL will be commissioned in 2015, and now it's still a question mark whether we can the project the railway can be commissioned in 2017.
At that time, the MTRCL said they can do it. Of course, that's not exactly the words they use, but that's what they meant. So for them, the most important thing is to place pressure on contractors. So in other words, the Secretary cannot say that it's impossible to commission in 2017. So it's just like the constitutional reform. Since your role is very passive in this project, there are several layers in the hierarchy, and you have consultants who monitor the MTRCL's work. Is this post really necessary? Have you considered setting up an email template instead and asking the MTRCL to recover the work progress? At the Railways Department, well, I can only say that your staff are either helpless or incompetent. Every time you seem to accept such delays, perhaps we should allow the director to respond. Thank you very much for the question. In terms of monitoring in the XRL projects, as reported in the subcommittee, we do have a mechanism in place. We have multiple checks and balances to monitor MTRCL's work. And according to the agreement, the MTRCL must do its best to catch up with the progress of the XRL project, and going forward, we'll continue to monitor their work. Any follow-up questions on the issue, Mr. Lee? You still have 20 seconds. I wanted the director to answer another question. Undersecretary, as I mentioned last time, the MTRCL will submit a revised engineering timeline to the government by June. And they have to obtain approval from their board before submitting this report to the government. And after receiving it, we would not simply just accept everything. We will see whether the timeline is reasonable. And later we will update the Legislative Council. Next, Mr. Albert Chen for the second round. First of all, I'm happy that the FSTB is going to conduct further studies on the payment terms or the progress. I'm not sure if the government officers were already on board in 2010 when XRL was first planned, but at that time a lot of legislators, including myself, raised questions on potential issues with the XRL. At that time I raised a few big questions, and it has been addressed by the Secretary then, including whether there is an ample supply of land, and the cooperation between the government and MTRCL. The XLI project was the first infrastructure project entrusted to the MTRCL. I had a lot of questions by then, but back then Ms. Chang, the secretary, promised that the government can commission the project on time without any cost overruns or delays. So was it really the fault of the responsible government officers, or was it the fault of the secretary? Or was the secretary only making empty promises without knowing the reality? And during funding applications, you promised that everything could be done, and history is repeating itself right now. The chief engineers might be at fault, and yet you want to stick with them. So how would you convince us, Undersecretary? I think there are several parts to Mr. Chen's question. First of all, the overall project delay or overrun. What really are the reasons? I understand that the LegCo set up a subcommittee to monitor the progress, and at the same time, the MTRCL also commissioned overseas experts to look at the overall progress, and the government also appointed an independent expert panel. That's not the point. My question was, back then, why was Ms. Eva Chang so sure that the project will be completed on time? You are repeating the same mistake you made 5 years ago. You are making empty claims in front of our eyes, and the secretary or the undersecretary might be speaking without knowing the facts. So how would you convince us that the situation is different from that 5 years ago? After realized there would be project overruns and delays, both the MTRCL and Legislative Council are doing some work. We would take reference from the report from an independent expert panel, and at the Legislative Council we would also follow up on the work. The secretary was confident at then because that was the situation at that time, and we base our facts on the past performance or track record of MTRCL, and compared with 5 years ago, it's the first time we have a concession agreement with the MTRCL, and this is a chance for us to learn whether this is the best mode of cooperation. Next, Mr. Alan Leung for the second round. I have something to clarify with the director. When you look at enclosure 1, under paragraph 3, the chief engineer under Division 2-3 of Railway Development Office, the post will lead a team of chief engineers and engineers. So is that the breakdown 8, 5, and 1 for a total of 14? Right. There will be 5 senior engineers and 8 engineers in enclosure 1. Under the Director of Highways, towards the left, we have a section called Hong Kong-Macau Bridge Hong Kong Project Management Office. This is irrelevant to the XRL project, right? For posts relating to XRL, should we only look at the posts under the Railway Development Office Director? Chairman, yes, he's correct. The organization chart under enclosure 1 wants to highlight the hierarchy of the Highways Department, and there are 4 main sections, and the Railway Development Office is responsible for the XRL project. Under the RDO, we have 2 separate groups: Railway Development Group 1 and Group 2. And these two groups have different scopes of work. And Group 2 will be responsible for XRL. And underneath Group 2, you can see 4 further subdivisions. One of these branches is called Division 2-3. And this is where the chief engineer post would be located. Right now, the chief engineer under Railway Development Division 2-3, right now you want to extend the post to the end of 2019. So for Railway Development Divisions 2-1 and 2-2, these 2 groups are also related to XRL. Would the 2 chief engineer posts end at the same time as this chief engineer post? In other words, at the end of 2019. The posts under Division 2-1 and 2-2 are permanent posts, and they are irrelevant to this funding application. Those are internal posts rather than supernumerary posts, right? Okay, thank you very much. Next, Mr. Gary Fan for the second round. The microphone's not coming through. It's all right now. The Undersecretary said they have learned the lesson. But for legislators, with the delays and cost overruns of the XRL, the lesson learned by the government is that they have learned something. For the Establishment Committee, Subcommittee, Finance Committee, and so on, I think it's problematic if we keep giving them extra money. And there's a multi-tiered monitoring mechanism in place. So according to the government, the chief engineers have done their job, and as such, the Establishment Subcommittee should continue to grant the funds. But the key is that this monitoring mechanism is not effective. And at the golf course towards the north of the West Kowloon terminus, no site investigation was done, and it was cited as a main reason for the delay of XRL. And between 2012 to 2014, the chief engineer at the Railway Development Office, the engineer was a key person in a monitoring work group, and 44 meetings were done. And after 44 meetings, you still chose to believe the information submitted by the MTRCL. So should the Legislative Council continue to trust this person and say that we would trust MTRCL. You did not explain how this monitoring mechanism can be effective and how you can recover the work progress. And according to the independent consultant, the recovery measures have been ineffective, but yet the government chooses to keep their trust in MTRCL. And the government and consultant are working together to hide the facts from the public and the media. So, Director, how would this monitoring mechanism ensure that there would be no further cost overruns and delays under XRL, and you won't have to use public money and come back again for funds at Legislative Council?
So how can you convince members of this subcommittee to approve funding for this? Director, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Fan, for your question. I'd like to talk about site investigation first. The member suggests that this is not comprehensive. I want to say that in the independent expert panel's report commissioned by the MTRCL, the report suggests that adequate site investigation was done. And before the contract commenced, they knew clearly the quantity of rocks and the rock levels. Well, Mr. Lau, how would you say that is adequate or sufficient? If it had been sufficient, MTRCL would not have come out and said that blasting works were required because of unforeseen ground condition. Well, as I mentioned just now, the quantity of underground rocks was clear, but then it had to do with not being able to identify the location of boulder stones. Mr. Lee Chok-yan. Just put the blame on ground condition. Every time when something goes wrong, just say that there are unforeseen ground conditions. And we can judge for ourselves whether the site investigation was sufficient or not. Well, coming back to this post, you had 44 meetings, you had monthly meetings, and I think for the chief engineer, if the post is retained, there will be more meetings. So can you explain with whom this chief engineer will be having meetings? If after holding so many meetings, the MTRCL can still have all the say, and that the MTRCL can say, yes, there is a delay, but there will also be a recovery process, then what's the point of having this post? So, Director, if we didn't have this post, what would happen? In fact, it would be all right. There would still be so many meetings, only that you would send a more junior staff to attend the meetings, not somebody with the rank of D1, but a junior staff. Because this chief engineer is at the rank of D1. Even if you ask this chief engineer to go to meetings, you won't be able to press MTRCL, because the MTRCL will put up with a lot of excuses for the delay, and in the end you would accept these excuses. So what's the point of having this middleman or the messenger at this rank? Let's say if we do not retain the post, if we find someone who is less experienced, things would still be the same. Director, no, that is not the case. As far as our monitoring work is concerned, we have been asking MTRCL for a lot of information on how they are to take on the project, and we need the post of a chief engineer to read and analyze the information, and when necessary, make his judgment and urge the MTRCL to expedite their progress. And this chief engineer would also need to attend other meetings, including meetings with MTRCL to review contracts in relation to the 40 plus major construction contracts. Monthly meetings would be held, and he would need to review the contracts and the progress of the contracts and the problems identified, and see if the MTRs, and to urge the MTRCL to do better. So it is necessary to apply for retention of this post of chief engineer with this level of experience and competence to undertake this work. Thank you. But we should learn from past experience that it is not effective. Under Secretary. Well, just to supplement, the government is footing the bill for this project, so one important function of this chief engineer is this. If any contractor would like to file a claim, this post should be the gatekeeper. If we do not have this post, that means no one will be overseeing the claims by contractors or MTRCL. Any other members wishing to ask questions? First round, second round, please press your button. If not, Mr. Wuchiwai. Third round, 3 minutes. Mr. Wuchiwai. Thank you, Chairman. The Director of Highways often emphasizes the multi-level monitoring. And for the IEP report announced in April 2014, when it said that the XRL would not be commissioned until 2017. It's true that after the report was released, a lot of work has been done, but before that, we don't really see how monitoring was done. So, can you tell us what the project control group did before April 2014 and after? Any difference in their work requirement? Because this comment actually comes from an IEP report which has been accepted by the government. So unless you're suggesting that this report is biased, we should refer to the recommendations in the report. And if there are new changes, you should tell us. That's the first point. Secondly, your colleagues had not diligently monitored the works, had not exercised independent judgment. So tell me if they're going to do so after the announcement of delay was made. Thirdly, you've also said that there may be other expenses not yet be included in the calculation of cost overrun. So do you agree that the final cost overrun amount may exceed $71.5 billion? Under Secretary. Well, our project control group may have views independent of the MTRCLs, as we explained in the Select Committee. And in 2013, apart from the West Kowloon terminus, we are also very concerned about the cross-border tunnel. With the help of the M&V consultant, the Highways Department colleagues did raise a lot of questions. So they also diligently monitor the works. I'll defer to Director to answer other questions of yours. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Sue, for your question. As for independent assessment, in the statement submitted to the Select Committee, and when I gave evidence, I also explained the same, and I also mentioned the same just now, so I should not repeat. As for the differences before and after April 2014, we adopted some of the recommendations in the IEP report. The IEP report recommends that progress reports made by the MTRCL be enhanced. It should be made more clearly in relation to the progress of projects, and we have asked the MTRCL to make improvements in this regard. Also, the IEP also recommends that we enhance our role of monitoring the MTRCL. And we have also done the same. Since February, we have invited the M&V consultant to come to our meetings and take part in our discussion. And we've also set up a special group with the M&V consultant to monitor work schedule. And this is also, this meeting is also chaired by the chief engineer. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong, third round. Mr. Lau, the director, just said that he is in charge of the committee. I'd like to know what committee it is. Director. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Leung, for your question. According to the entrustment agreement, as far as works monitoring is concerned, we need to set up a works monitoring group with participation from the MTRCL and the Highways Department, and it is to be chaired by the Director of Highways. So I am chairman of this group or committee. All right, understood. This IEP report has 5 recommendations, and you don't need to read out the 5 recommendations, Mr. Leung. I want to know whether you have relayed any one of the 5 recommendations to the Secretary or your colleagues. If so, when? I don't quite understand Mr. Leung's question. Can you elucidate? At any stage, this is the government jargon. Ever since you were born, when have you talked about the 5 recommendations? Well, that means in your project supervision committee. Are there any minutes, or do you recall ever mentioning any of the 5 recommendations? As I said just now, after April 2014, pursuant to the IEP recommendations, we have introduced improvement measures, and we have discussed these recommendations at the Project Supervision Committee. Of course, before that, we did not mention these.
I'd like to remind the director that the post was created in 2008, and you only started work after such a long time, and now you're coming back for more funds. If you are the director and if you are the chairman of the committee, you did not notify the undersecretary or the secretary, how could you mobilize your staff? And you said there's a contract review committee and you fail to work with both your seniors and juniors. So what's the point of giving you more funds? Chairman, I urge the director to try to recall when he made these recommendations. I'd like to move a motion to adjourn proceedings. Right now, according to Rule 32 of the Establishment Committee rules, Mr. Leung Kwok-hong moves a motion to adjourn proceedings for discussions for paper EC 201-41-521. Members may speak for not more than once. We don't have a lot of time left, so I recommend members to speak no longer than 3 minutes each. Please press the press to speak button if you wish to give your views. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong first. Chairman, the director is very arrogant and he said everything has been said before. Let me just repeat what you said. You said the MTRCL contractor understands that there are a lot of stones, and an MNV consultant was appointed and site investigation was done, and foundation studies were also conducted. And for site investigation at the golf course, they knew about the soil conditions, and there were the presence of boulder stones. And I know what boulder stones are. If you knew there were boulder stones, what did you do? You are very experienced, but yet you didn't inform us of the boulder stones. And you kept telling us that delays, they didn't equal to delays. So you have been very arrogant. So I just pointed out how absurd your arguments were. There are lots of technical papers, and you said the chief engineer has a role to play in analyzing the information and promoting XLL project in general. And as chairman of the committee, when did you raise any of those 5 recommendations? And the fact is you didn't. And now you said the chief engineer has a role to play in the contract review committee. So this is a waste of money. I'm very shocked if you indeed made such bold recommendations. If you did indeed raise these recommendations, I'd like to apologize, because you have been doing a very good job. I think you should go back and try to recall what you actually said. Did what you say reflect the views of all engineers? And for Lin Tang, and there were similar issues with the soil conditions, with the piling and stones, and there were issues with the pressure tiles, and you are the one to blame. You have not done monitoring properly. You should be consistent, and you cannot put the blame on us. 3 minutes, please, Mr. Albert Chan. I'm very doubtful of the government's work in monitoring. Of course, the culprit would be MTRCL. Due to the unsatisfactory contracts granted at that time, we are now seeing issues. Should the responsible government officers be allowed to continue? I'm not sure whether any of them have been replaced over the years. If you said that the responsible officers have issued warnings, then the MTRCL might be the ones to blame. If you ask, even if you ask the secretary or undersecretary to show the responsibility, it's inappropriate because they are not experienced in this field and they're not familiar with the project. If they are to be held accountable, then it spells disaster. If you ask the secretary who does not have the knowledge, then you can never monitor MTRCL's work properly. You should seek independent experts to monitor the project to avoid any repeats in the future. We should not just count on the civil servants. But according to what he said, I'm not convinced whether the responsible government officers are dedicated to the monitoring and coordination work. If you indeed said these things, can you tell us the exact time? If you indeed issued such warnings, is it a case of bias given to MTRCL by the Bureau? This is something I want to hear, because you should absolve yourself of any blames. I think what Longhair said might be unfair to you unless you explain otherwise. You might be accused unreasonably. I hope the Bureau or Highways Department can speak from a professional capacity. So Leung Kwok-hong, does any other members wish to speak on Leung Kwok-hong's motion? If so, please press the button. If not, the Undersecretary, please. Thank you, Chairman. We understand that members are unhappy with the cost overrun and delays of the XRL project, and we have a role to play in stepping up monitoring for MTRCL. We agree that the government has to do a better job in monitoring, and we should be the gatekeeper. This chief engineer is an essential post in the entire team. If we do not continue with this post, we cannot fulfill public expectations, and the monitoring work in the future might be compromised. So while the legislators request better monitoring from the government, they should allow the government to continue with this post so as to complete the XRL project successfully. Mr. Leung Kwok-hong, anything else? You still have 2 minutes. Director, the reason I said what I said was because of the way you answered our questions. If you the questions should actually be answered by the Undersecretary instead of yourself, and he should speak and say that he has done these things, but he didn't, so I could only put the blame on you. And Professor Anthony Chung should be the one to explain. Professor Chung is an academic, and he had no field experience. He is an academic, and he used to be the Vice Chancellor. And I still recall talking with him before. And it's the same with the Undersecretary. He used to be a journalist. So in effect, this is just a PR exercise. If the Undersecretary has any field experience in engineering, then I think there's a big issue with the establishment. And the government has paid the MTRCL for a project that the MTRCL would own. And we are talking about car parks, cooling systems, and so on. If you knew that there were problems, you would not start the drilling. And your time's up. I now put this motion to the vote. We'd like to adjourn proceedings of discussion for paper EC 2014-215-21. Yes, Mr. Lee Cheuk-yan wants to claim a division. Now the bell will ring.
Voting begins. Before I announce the voting results, would members please check your votes? Voting is closed. Please display the voting results. Voting result 18 for, 9 against, no abstention. I declare the motion passed. So next item. EC bracket 2014-15 or 2015-16 number 2. This is for the creation of the following permanent posts in the Housing Department at the rank of D1 to cope with the additional workload arising from the further increase in public housing production target as pledged in the 2014 policy address and promulgated in the Long-Term Housing Strategy 2014, LTHS 2014. Let's invite the administration to be seated first.
今日出席會議，答覆各位委員。
Government officials attending today's meeting to answer members' questions. We have Permanent Secretary for Transport and Housing, Mr. Stanley Ying, and Ms. Ada Fong, Deputy Director of Housing Development and Construction. As Ms. Alice Mack, Chairman of the Housing Panel, is not a member of this subcommittee, nor can she attend today's meeting, I will briefly set out the deliberations of the panel based on the information prepared by the Secretariat. At the meeting on the 2nd of March 2015, the panel on housing discussed the above proposal. Members agreed that the proposal be submitted to the ESC for consideration. In the deliberation process, some members are concerned that the Labour Union of the Housing Department expressed concern that because of a lack of frontline and professional staff, it's hard to cope with the various housing measures and the additional workload. The members urged the Housing Department to enhance professional manpower support and to set up a mechanism to ensure quality of housing projects to avoid short pile incidents from happening again. Dr. Kwokaki, 4 minutes. Of course, I'm all for this post, but I don't know after showing my support or approving this post whether, first of all, housing production will go up, and second of all, after the LTHS report is announced, the public and the council are greatly disappointed in the report. In 2012, CY Leung made all the promises, but now, according to the figures, we are just staying put. What we have been doing for the past 2 years are actually the work of Donald Tsang. There is only a slight increase in terms of figures. Has it to do with manpower? If that is the case, it's not reasonable to just create the post of a chief architect. And the government has various strange initiatives, such as the Green Form HO housing ownership scheme initiative. I don't know whether CY Leung is messing up the housing policy. He has come up with strange initiatives, but in fact the pie hasn't been expanded. It's just a matter of how we divide the pie, and maybe even public housing supply would be affected. I am very disappointed in the government in its window dressing tactics instead of doing real work. I'd like to know whether, apart from creating this post, there are ways to increase housing supply for the coming 10 years so that all walks of society would be able to benefit, because we're talking about a long waiting time of 10 years for PRH housing. Well, let me answer Dr. Kwokak's questions one by one. For the green form scheme, we explained that before, and let me confirm with Dr. Kwok that in relation to this scheme, as far as our project teams are concerned, housing construction remains the same. It's just a matter of how these units are sold. And as we explained at the housing panel before, it would be treated as subsidized housing. For our colleagues, it's just another project. As for resource allocation, well, I need to confirm with Dr. Kwok that we cannot increase, or we cannot do all the work just by creating the post of a chief architect. So if members agree or approve the application of creating this post, we're going to increase non-professional and non-directorate posts at various levels to form the 7th team. And with this directorate post and other non-directorate staff, will we be able to do all the work? No. Manpower is one prerequisite, but we have other prerequisites such as land, funding, in particular land. And in previous discussions in this council, we explained to members that land is still an ongoing challenge that we are struggling with, and we also need to have manpower support and other support, resource support. Well, I don't think Permanent Secretary has given the full answer. Dr. Kwok, please wait for next round. If we continue with land, we can go on for years. Next member, Mr. Liang Yu-chung, 4 minutes. Well, the previous item touched upon the issue of short piles. I don't think this has to do with manpower. I think it has to do with monitoring or work supervision. During the 85,000 PRH or units era, works progress were expedited. It had nothing to do with manpower, and that led to poor housing quality as well as incidents such as a short pile. And PS just now repeatedly said that more manpower is needed due to additional workload and that you need to set up a new team. But this may help you with your work, but what about work supervision? How can you ensure quality? This is my concern because we don't want to see this happen again. When there was a housing target of 85,000 units, there were a lot of problems. Just look at the housing quality in Tin Shui Wai. With such a huge workload, PS, how can you ensure that supervision can be done properly so as not to have incidents, similar incidents such as poor housing quality, short piling, or insufficient raw materials? Well, about the specific questions, I can defer to Ada. But in principle, I can say to members that in relation to housing production targets, it is a major challenge for us. We can meet the targets, but at the same time, we want to assure quality. So if one of the reasons we strive for resources for the creation of the directorate posts and non-directorate posts, we want to meet the target as well as assuring quality. And I'll defer to Ada on the point of quality. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Member, for the question. Systemically, we had a reform in 2000. We have implemented 50 measures. On piling works, we enhanced supervision. Instead of resorting to design and build contracts, we use piling works with design coming from our engineers. And we also carried out site investigation works beforehand to ensure that contractors would not need to face or would not have the incentive of risking the quality of works due to unforeseen ground conditions. On work supervision, we also enhance our resources on frontline supervision on site, and we also have an independent audit team to monitor private contractors for housing projects. And on superstructure projects, we also tighten up the inspection procedure. And the standard for the certificate of compliance has also been tightened up. And we also have RFID and other electronic means to ensure that the materials like bricks and other materials those we ordered. And after implementing these 50 measures, we have received constantly improving feedback from our tenants. Any other members? Dr. Kwok-Aki, 3 minutes, third round. Just now, Permanent Secretary gave an answer, but I beg to differ because there are aged PRH estates to be redeveloped. These are valuable land resources, and the government doesn't seem to be committed in redevelopment projects. Secondly, there are also aged flatted factories which are in urban districts which are suitable for redevelopment as well. And this should also be undertaken by the housing department. Thirdly, I don't know whether you have been discussing with other government departments or the government property agency in relation to land. Some of these sites are not utilized to their maximum. Some of the sites have 3-story, 4-story developments, like we discussed before on waste disposal, for other kinds of facilities. Is a waste of resources. I don't know whether your department has talked to other government departments. There should be better coordination. Please don't tell us on the one hand that land is a valuable resource. On the other hand, the government is wasting land. 3 questions from Dr. Kwok. I will take the first 2. First, on redevelopment, we understand that during the consultation for the long-term housing strategy, we understand that for some aged PRH estates, there is a need to redevelop those estates, and in the process, we could increase the maximum plot ratio. And after promulgating the long-term housing strategy last year, we agreed that we would consider redevelopment for suitable PRH estates, but one prerequisite is that we should give adequate notice to affected tenants. That is a notice period of not less than 3 years. And as discussed at the Long-Term Housing Strategy Committee, in the long run, we stand to benefit, but then we need to use a lot of resources as well for demolition works and for scrapping units, for producing more units, and we need to consider more carefully.
For all industrial buildings, the housing authority is monitoring the use of these buildings. The current use is actually very satisfactory. A lot of smaller companies make use of industrial building flats for various events and activities. Last week, the group inspected the industrial buildings, and the current usage is satisfactory. Not a lot of the units are left empty. Next, Mr. Ma Fung Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. Right now, they are applying for a bigger establishment. I agree that there is additional workload because of the increase in public housing production target. A few years ago, there were a construction peak for public housing. So my question is, can the government provide any information or comparison figures of the current level as compared with a few years ago? And at that time, there was some years ago, there was a trough in terms of construction demand, and was the establishment shrunk at that time? Permanent Secretary. Perhaps I will share a few figures. And at the end of 2002, at the peak of construction demand, we had 78 directorate staff, and in March 2007, which was a bottom, we only had 34 directorate staff. And according to our paper, paragraph 21, the demand has increased, and right now we have 65 permanent staff, and the highest was 78, the lowest was 39. Right now we have 65. And during the peak, when you had 78 directorate staff, were all of them permanent posts? Were the number of posts compressed? Permanent Secretary, we shrunk from 78 to 49, and within those 78 staff, I'm not sure if any of them were supernumerary, but anyhow, the total number of staff dropped. Perhaps you can provide us with more information after the meeting. Mr. Ma, this new post is a permanent post, right? So I'd just like to know the grounds. Why won't you consider supernumerary posts if this is what you had done before? But right now you're proposing a permanent post, so I just want to compare it with the situation years ago. We recommend a permanent post because we foresee major battles ahead in increasing public housing production. For supernumerary posts spanning 3 or 5 years, they are inadequate to tackle our challenges. Let's say if we need to build a public housing estate, it will likely last for 5, 7 years or beyond. If we only create a post, a 3-year post, it's inappropriate. And even for permanent posts, if we feel that they are redundant, as with the past, we would take away these posts or delete them at LegCo, so these posts would not be left vacant. And by 2000, from 2002 to 2007, we cut the number of posts by 29. So please be assured that that's what we would do if the need arises. Mr. Albert Chen, what I requested is similar to Ma Fong Kwok. I want a table of figures from the government. I understand that there are discrepancies between the employment periods and the housing production periods. There's a time gap of 4 or 5 years. Can you come up with a table of figures in the last 20 or 30 years showing the public housing production targets and employment periods, so we can see the correlation between the number of staff and the HA's housing production. I want to see whether they're comparable. Suppose you have 20,000 new PRH units every year. How many staff do you need? So we would like to do a comparison. I'm not trying to stand in your way, but I need to see the differences and whether the number of staff is comparable to housing production. It would be fairer to everyone if we have a sense of the big picture. So can you share this table with us later? When I met the Permanent Secretary earlier, I mentioned that the HA's usual practice is that they have some new ideas whenever they have new staff on board. Of course, I recognize the professionalism of the architects, designers, and engineers, but a lot of designers are impractical. For example, if they put clothing racks in the kitchen, it's not pragmatic, and the designs of the toilets are also ridiculous. They are so narrow that fatter people could not live there. I challenged one of them to move in with us, but he refused. And the beds cannot accommodate heavy people like myself, and you cannot even take a shower or use the toilet. So these are very basic mistakes made by the designers of the hospital authority, or by the housing authority rather. It seems that they never think from the user's point of view. They should better understand the needs of the residents, and this way they can avoid silly mistakes. And the open areas of the housing estates are too close to the buildings, and some people play very loud music and the residents can hardly sleep. So the open space at public housing estates should not be located too close to the residential blocks. I hope you won't repeat these mistakes in the future, and I certainly don't hope the public to suffer because of these design problems. In terms of the design deficiencies, we accept the criticisms and hopefully we can do better in the future. Right now, we would conduct a survey for new residents who just moved in, and they can give their comments on the design, and we will take their comments on board. And for the historical figures, we would consolidate them and share with the members later. But please be aware that these figures are time sensitive, and some of our work cannot be quantified easily. Mr. Uchiwai, 4 minutes, please. 2 very simple points. First of all, for this chief architect post, the housing department would entrust this chief architect with the job of designing new public housing estates. Can you give us more details on how this chief architect will manage other stuff? And we have received complaints that most of the public housing designs were designed with from an architectural standpoint, but in terms of the actual management, the designers would face problems. So can you tell us how the architects would work with designers at the moment? So apart from aesthetic considerations, would the architects consider the designs from an operational point of view? For new public housing estates, very little flexibility is offered in the design. Some very often empty bays are reserved to allow for greater flexibility for community facilities. So why is this practice no longer in place? Is it because of aesthetic considerations? But without these empty bays, a lot of public estates have lost the flexibility to introduce extra facilities for the community. I'll try to address the first question. In terms of design and management, the architects and designers would look at the issue from a different point of view because of different expertise. Under our department, there's ample communication And in directorate meetings chaired by myself, I see that our architects and operations staff have their respective expertise, and they communicate frequently. In the buildings committee of the housing authority, the situation is the same. Different staff would have different areas of expertise, and there remains ample communication between different staff. And in the design phase, if an issue is detected, the viewpoint might be different from an operations viewpoint. Since time is limited, perhaps I will allow the Deputy Director to talk about the MT base. Thank you very much for the question. With regards to the cooperation between architects, designers, and operations staff, during the design phase, we would involve staff from the estate management office, and there's ample communication. The designers would certainly consider the need for future maintenance and repair. This is something our designers must think about. And with regards to the MT base, right now we have some ventilation slots to ensure that the blocks have no negative impacts on the surrounding areas. And we can reserve space for other facilities. There can be some flexibility. But right now, a lot of housing estate facilities require a lot of space, so there's not enough space left for empty spaces. It's 10:30. I propose extending the meeting by a maximum of 15 minutes. Any objections from members on extending this meeting till 10:45? If not, Mr. Martin Liao, please. Housing development is a key area of the current administration, so by having enough hands, we can expedite the process. So we would support the recruitment of extra staff by the department, and with more housing developments, public expectations are higher and higher, and the quantity and quality of these housing developments are also important. And we've heard about issues like leaking, short piles, etc. So I'd like to know whether the government has any monitoring measures in place to avoid any supervision or administrative mistakes.
Yes, on the quality of PRH housing, we understand that we constantly need to improve, and we need to bear in mind that on the one hand we need to increase housing production, on the other hand we need to ensure quality, and these are the factors for our consideration in increasing manpower resources. Deputy Director. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Member, for the question. On quality, since year 2000, we have stepped up our supervising staff on piling works. We have abandoned the design and construction contracts. We have piling works using the design of our engineers, and we also do site investigation to prevent contractors from facing the risk of due to unforeseen ground condition. When we also step up building inspection works, when we also have preventive measures such as the use of RFID to ensure that the concrete blocks would be the ones we ordered. And we also, as far as estate management is concerned, adopt a mechanism similar to the private sector in monitoring our housing estates. And we also have a survey on to take feedback from tenants. And the satisfaction score have increased from 70 to 95 over the years. No follow-up, Mr. Martinel, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. For new housing PRH estates, we see that the fittings provided by the housing department, like the sinks and pipes and internal fittings, may soon be abandoned. I'd like to know how serious the situation is, and also whether there are whether there are specific measures to tackle this to prevent the much waste generated. We understand the situation, and we don't have much inbuilt fittings. Well, we minimize fittings as much as possible to prevent construction materials from going to waste. As for kitchen and toilet, we only provide basic facilities. Well, in the past, we may use gas stoves. Now they may use induction stoves, and they may therefore need to adjust the height of the kitchen stove cupboard. And therefore, we are allowing tenants to, we actually help tenants adjust the height of the kitchen stove cupboard to prevent tenants demolishing the kitchen stove altogether. And we also minimize the fittings provided. I just want to know, I just want to have supplementary information on the responsive measures mentioned. Any other questions from members? If not, I will put this item to a vote. For those in favor of EC bracket 2015-16-2, please raise your hands. Yes, please put down your hands. Anyone against? No. I declare this proposal pass. Any separate voting required for this item at the FCC? No. The meeting is adjourned today. I'd like to remind members that the next meeting is scheduled for the 23rd of June, Tuesday, 8:30 to 10:45. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, government officials.